Victoria's scream pierced the night air as her feet slipped on the crumbling edge of Songsan Cliff, her hands instinctively clutching her 6-month pregnant belly. The betrayal still burned in her chest, Minseok's cold eyes as he pushed her, his words echoing, "You and that bastard child will disappear forever." Time slowed as she fell, the jagged rocks below rushing toward her like hungry teeth, death certain, when suddenly powerful arms encircled her waist, pulling her against a hard chest that smelled of leather and danger. "I've got you," a deep voice whispered against her ear in accented English, his grip unbreakable as he hauled them both to safety on a narrow ledge that she hadn't even seen in the darkness. Victoria's heart hammered as she found herself pressed against her mysterious savior, her body trembling with shock and adrenaline. Even in the moonlight, she could see the sharp angles of his face, the scar running from his left temple to his jaw, and the expensive suit that screamed wealth and power despite being torn from their desperate climb to safety. Who are you?" she gasped, her hands still protective over her unborn child who was kicking frantically, as if sensing the danger they'd just escaped. His dark eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was something predatory in his gaze, but also protective, like a wolf guarding something precious. Someone who doesn't like seeing pregnant women murdered by cowards. His voice carried a slight accent, refined but with an edge of danger underneath. "I'm Jae-hyun. And you, little dove, are going to tell me exactly why Kang Minseok just tried to kill you." The name sent ice through Victoria's veins. Her face must have shown her shock because Jae-hyun's expression darkened further. "You know Minseok? I know many things about the Kang family." His voice carried a lethal edge as he helped her climb to solid ground, his hands steady and sure. "Including the fact that they've made some very powerful enemies recently. But I never expected to find one of their victims falling from a cliff." Victoria stumbled as her legs threatened to give out, the full reality of what had almost happened crashing over her. Not only had Minseok tried to kill her, but he'd tried to murder their unborn child, a child he'd once claimed to want. Jae-hyun's steady hands kept her upright, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone who radiated such controlled violence. "Please," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I need to get away from here. He'll come back with more men. He said he'd make sure no one ever found my body." "No," Jae-hyun said firmly, his dark eyes scanning the clifftop where they could already hear car engines approaching. "He won't get another chance. Because after tonight, Kang Minseok is going to learn what happens when you cross the Seoul Dragons." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Seoul Dragons, she'd heard Minseok mention them in hushed, terrified tones during phone calls he thought she wasn't listening to. They were the most feared criminal organization in South Korea, and this man who just saved her life was clearly one of them. "I can't get involved with," she started, but Jae-hyun cut her off with a look that could have melted steel. "You're already involved, Victoria." The fact that he knew her name made her blood run cold, but before she could ask how, he continued. "The moment you conceived Kang Minseok's heir, you became a target. But now..." His fingers traced her jawline with surprising gentleness, his touch both comforting and possessive. "Now you're under my protection." The sound of multiple vehicles approaching made them both freeze. Through the trees, Victoria could see headlights cutting through the darkness, at least 4 cars, maybe more. Minseok hadn't just come back, he'd brought an army. "How many men does he have?" Jae-hyun asked, his voice calm despite the approaching danger. "I don't know," Victoria whispered, terror making her voice shake. "He's never let me see this side of his life before tonight." Jae-hyun cursed in Korean, then swept Victoria into his arms despite her pregnancy. "Hold tight. We're going to move fast." He carried her through the darkness with the sure-footedness of someone who knew these cliffs intimately, and Victoria realized this meeting wasn't as accidental as it seemed. "You were already here," she said as they moved. "You were watching Minseok. Very observant." His breathing wasn't even labored despite carrying her and navigating the treacherous terrain. "The Kang family has been on our radar for months. Tonight was supposed to be a simple surveillance operation. But you saved me instead." Jae-hyun's arms tightened around her protectively. "Some things are more important than surveillance." They reached a sleek black motorcycle hidden among the trees just as shouts erupted from the clifftop behind them. Jae-hyun settled Victoria carefully on the bike, his hands gentle on her swollen belly. "Can you hold on? Do I have a choice?" His smile was sharp and dangerous. "Not if you want to live." The ride through Seoul's winding mountain roads was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Victoria clung to Jae-hyun's back, feeling the power of the machine beneath them and the steady strength of the man controlling it. Behind them, the glow of pursuing headlights grew brighter. "They're gaining on us," she shouted over the engine noise. "Let them try." Jae-hyun's voice was confident as he took a sharp turn that had Victoria's heart in her throat. "This bike knows roads their cars can't follow." He was right. Within minutes, they'd left the pursuit behind, weaving through narrow alleyways and side streets that would have been impossible for larger vehicles to navigate. But Victoria knew this was just the beginning. Minseok wouldn't give up so easily. When they finally stopped at what looked like an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district, Victoria was shaking from more than just the cold night air. "Is this where you're going to kill me?" she asked, only half joking. Jae-hyun's expression softened as he helped her off the bike. "If I wanted to kill you, I would have let gravity do it for me." He gestured toward a hidden door. "This is a safe house. We need to talk, and I need to treat your injuries." Victoria looked down at herself for the first time since the cliff and realized she was bleeding. Her arms were scraped raw from the rocks, her dress was torn, and there was a gash on her leg that was steadily dripping blood. The adrenaline had masked the pain, but now it hit her all at once. "Oh God," she whispered, suddenly dizzy. "The baby, what if?" "Hey." Jae-hyun caught her as she swayed, his voice gentle but firm. "The baby is fine. You're fine. I'm going to take care of you." The safe house was spartanly furnished but clean and well-stocked. Jae-hyun led her to a couch and began cleaning her wounds with practiced efficiency, his touch careful and professional. "You've done this before," Victoria observed, wincing as he disinfected a particularly deep scrape. "More times than I care to count." His dark eyes met hers. "In my line of work, patch jobs are a regular occurrence. Your line of work being crime. My line of work being justice." His jaw tightened. The kind that doesn't come from courts and judges who can be bought. As he bandaged her injuries, Victoria studied his face. There were lines around his eyes that spoke of violence and loss, but also a gentleness in his touch that suggested he hadn't always been what he was now. "Why did you really save me?" she asked quietly. Jae-hyun's hands stilled on the bandage. "What makes you think there's more to it?" "Because you could have just watched. Could have used whatever happened to me as leverage against Minseok later. But instead, you risked your own operation to save someone you'd never met." For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I don't like seeing innocent people hurt. There's more to it than that." Jae-hyun finished with her bandages and sat back, his expression unreadable. "You're very persistent. I'm carrying a child whose father just tried to murder us both. I think I've earned the right to know who I'm trusting with our lives." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. "I had a sister once. Younger than you, pregnant like you. She trusted the wrong man too." Victoria's heart clenched at the pain in his voice. "What happened to her?" He decided she was inconvenient. Jae-hyun's hands clenched into fists. "She died alone and afraid, just like you almost did tonight." The confession hung between them, raw and painful. Victoria reached out to cover his clenched fist with her hand. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart." His dark eyes met hers. Men like Minseok don't stop. They don't feel remorse or change their minds. If you try to go back to your normal life, he'll find you and finish what he started. Then what do you suggest? You disappear. Become someone new. Let me protect you until we can find a permanent solution to the Minseok problem. Victoria's free hand moved instinctively to her belly. A permanent solution meaning what, exactly? Whatever it takes to ensure he never threatens you or your child again. The implications of his words should have terrified her, but instead, Victoria felt a dark satisfaction. Minseok had abused her, terrorized her, and tonight he tried to commit murder. Perhaps it was time for consequences. What would that look like? This protection you're offering. Jae-hyun leaned back, studying her face. You'd stay with me. Live under my protection until after the baby is born and we've dealt with Minseok permanently. In return, you'd help me destroy his family's criminal empire. I don't know anything about their criminal activities. You know Minseok intimately. You've lived with him, seen his patterns, met his associates. You know things you don't even realize you know. If you're already hooked on Victoria's intense journey from victim to survivor, make sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think she should do next. Victoria considered his proposal as she sipped the tea Jae-hyun had made her, something herbal and soothing that eased the tension in her muscles. The rational part of her mind screamed that trading one dangerous man for another was insanity. But the rational part of her mind had also trusted Minseok completely, and look how that had ended. If I agree to this, she said carefully, what exactly would my role be? Information gathering, primarily. Help me understand how Minseok thinks, who he trusts, what his vulnerabilities are. Jae-hyun sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert. Nothing that would put you or the baby in direct danger. And afterward? After Minseok is dealt with? Afterward, you're free to choose. New identity, new life, wherever you want to go. Or... He paused, something shifting in his expression. You could stay. With you? With me. The simple words carried a weight that made Victoria's pulse quicken. There was something in the way he looked at her, not like she was a victim to be pitted or a pawn to be used, but like she was something precious that he wanted to protect. You barely know me, she pointed out. I know you're brave enough to stand up to a man who was abusing you. I know you're strong enough to survive attempted murder. And I know you're smart enough to see through Minseok's manipulation before it was too late. His dark eyes never left hers. That's more than enough foundation to build on. Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks at the approval in his voice. When was the last time someone had spoken to her like she was strong instead of fragile? When had anyone ever made her feel capable instead of helpless? This is crazy, she whispered. The best things usually are. Before Victoria could respond, Jae-hyun's phone buzzed. His expression went hard as he read the message. We need to move. Now. What's wrong? Minseok put out a bounty on your head. 2,000,000 for information leading to your capture, dead or alive. He was already moving, grabbing bags from hidden compartments. Every criminal in Seoul will be looking for you by morning. The news hit Victoria like ice water. He's really not going to stop, is he? No. Which is why we're going to end this before he gets another chance. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Victoria's phone, which she'd forgotten she still had, buzzed with an incoming call. Minseok's name appeared on the screen, and her blood chilled. Don't answer it, Jae-hyun warned. Maybe I should. Maybe I can. Victoria. His voice was firm. Men like Minseok use your emotions against you. He'll apologize, make excuses, promise to change. Don't give him that opportunity. But even as Jae-hyun spoke, Victoria found herself thinking about the Minseok she'd fallen in love with, charming, attentive, seemingly devoted. Had any of it been real, or had she been living with a stranger all along? The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. And again. He's desperate, Jae-hyun observed. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. On the fourth call, Victoria made a decision that surprised them both. She answered the phone and put it on speaker. Victoria, thank God. Minseok's voice was strained, almost panicked. Where are you? I've been so worried. Worried? Victoria's voice was deadly calm. About whether you successfully murdered me and our baby? What? No, Victoria, you don't understand. What happened tonight? It wasn't supposed to go that far. I never meant to hurt you. You pushed me off a cliff. I was angry. You have to understand the pressure I'm under. My father, the engagement, the business, I wasn't thinking clearly. Victoria looked at Jae-hyun, who was shaking his head grimly. This was exactly the manipulation he'd warned her about. So you're saying it was an accident? Victoria asked. Yes. Exactly. I lost control for a moment, but I came to my senses immediately. I've been searching everywhere for you. I even called the police, told them you were missing. The lie came so smoothly, so convincingly, that Victoria might have believed it if she hadn't lived through the reality. The police who are bought and paid for by your family? Victoria, please. Come home. Let me make this right. I'll call off the engagement, tell my father everything. We can be together, just like we planned. Just like we planned? Victoria's voice rose with incredulous fury. We never planned anything, Minseok. You strung me along for months while you were engaged to someone else. I was going to tell you. When? After the wedding? After you'd secured your precious business deal? Jae-hyun held up his hand, signaling for Victoria to end the call, but she wasn't done. Months of suppressed anger and humiliation were pouring out of her. I loved you, she continued, tears streaming down her face. I thought you loved me. I thought we were building a life together. But you never saw me as anything more than a convenient distraction. That's not true. Yes, it is. Victoria's voice cracked with pain. And tonight, when I became inconvenient, you decided murder was easier than taking responsibility. Victoria, listen to me. No, you listen to me. Her voice went deadly quiet, and Jae-hyun's eyebrows rose in surprise. I survived your murder attempt. I know what you really are now. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too. You don't want to threaten me, Minseok's voice turned cold, the mask finally slipping. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Don't I? Victoria looked at Jae-hyun, drawing strength from his approving nod. I know about the arms dealing. I know about the money laundering through your father's construction company. I know about the bribes to city officials. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Victoria thought Minseok had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice was pure ice. You're making a very big mistake, Victoria. The only mistake I made was trusting you. Victoria ended the call and immediately turned off the phone, removing the battery as Jae-hyun had taught her. That was either very brave or very stupid, Jae-hyun observed. Probably both. Victoria wiped her tears, surprised by how cathartic the confrontation had felt. But I needed him to know that I'm not the helpless victim he thought he was killing. No, Jae-hyun said, his dark eyes warm with admiration. You're definitely not helpless. They spent the next hour moving through Seoul's underground network, safe houses, hidden tunnels, and secret routes that spoke of years of careful preparation. Victoria began to understand just how extensive Jae-hyun's organization was, and how seriously they took security. How long have you been planning for something like this? She asked as they waited in yet another hidden room while Jae-hyun's people swept their next destination. Years. His answer was matter-of-fact. In my business, you always have to assume someone wants you dead. The only way to survive is to always be 3 steps ahead. Is this what your life is like? Always running, always hiding? Jae-hyun considered the question seriously. Most of the time, no. I have legitimate businesses, a public profile, places I can go without looking over my shoulder. But when I'm actively hunting someone like Minseok. He shrugged. Caution becomes paramount. You're hunting him? The Kang family has been a problem for Seoul for years. They use violence and intimidation to muscle in on territory that doesn't belong to them. What happened to you tonight just gave me personal motivation to accelerate my timeline. Victoria studied his profile in the dim light of their hiding spot. Personal motivation? I don't like seeing innocent people hurt, he repeated, but this time Victoria heard the deeper truth underneath. You like me, she said, surprised by her own directness. Jae-hyun turned to look at her fully, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. Is that so surprising? I'm pregnant with another man's baby, I have no money, no resources, and I'm being hunted by criminals. I'm not exactly a catch. You're brave, intelligent, and beautiful. You've survived abuse and attempted murder with your dignity intact. You're carrying a child you're willing to die protecting. His voice was soft but intense. You're exactly a catch. The sincerity in his voice made Victoria's heart flutter in a way it hadn't since the early days with Minseok, before she'd learned what he really was. Jae-hyun. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm offering my protection because it's the right thing to do, not because I expect anything in return. But I won't lie and pretend I'm not attracted to you. This is complicated. The best things usually are, he repeated his earlier words, then smiled. Besides, I've never been one to shy away from complicated. Before Victoria could respond, Jae-hyun's phone buzzed with an urgent message. His expression darkened as he read it. What now? Victoria asked. Minseok's escalating faster than I expected. He's not just putting out bounties anymore, he's actively mobilizing his father's security teams to search the city. What does that mean? It means he's desperate enough to risk exposure. And desperate men are unpredictable. Jae-hyun stood up, extending his hand to help Victoria to her feet. We need to get you somewhere completely off the grid. As they moved through the night toward their next destination, Victoria reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few hours. This morning, she'd been a terrified woman living with an abusive man, trying to convince herself that things would get better after the baby was born. Now she was being protected by a dangerous criminal who looked at her like she was worth fighting for. It should have been terrifying. Instead, for the first time in months, Victoria felt like she might actually have a future worth living. The safe house Jae-hyun brought her to was unlike the others, a penthouse apartment in an exclusive building, elegantly furnished and clearly a long-term residence rather than a temporary hideout. Is this where you live? Victoria asked, taking in the expensive artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul. One of my homes, Jae-hyun confirmed. But also the most secure. This building has better security than most government facilities. As if to prove his point, they'd passed through 3 separate security checkpoints just to reach the elevator, each one staffed by men who clearly knew Jae-hyun personally and treated him with deep respect. Must be lonely, Victoria observed, living in a fortress. I chose this life. Jae-hyun's tone was matter-of-fact, but Victoria caught the hint of regret underneath. Loneliness was part of the price. Was? He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. Recent circumstances have made me reconsider what I'm willing to accept as inevitable. The guest room he showed her to was larger than her entire apartment had been, with an ensuite bathroom and a wardrobe full of women's clothing in various sizes. You keep a lot of women's clothes around, Victoria commented, trying to keep her tone light. My housekeeper stocks essentials for any situation that might arise. I've had to provide emergency shelter for witnesses, informants, family members of associates. You'd be surprised how often people need to disappear quickly. And you help them all? When it serves my interests, yes. When it's simply the right thing to do. He shrugged. Also yes. Victoria selected a soft nightgown from the wardrobe, grateful for something clean and comfortable to wear. As she prepared for what little sleep the night might offer, she found herself thinking about Jae-hyun's words. He helped people because it was the right thing to do. How long had it been since she'd encountered someone who operated from that kind of moral foundation? Certainly not Minseok, who'd proven tonight that his only moral compass pointed toward his own self-interest. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Jae-hyun appeared in the doorway carrying a tray with tea and what looked like late-night snacks. I thought you might be hungry. You need to keep your strength up for the baby. The thoughtfulness of the gesture made Victoria's throat tighten with emotion. You don't have to take care of me like this. I want to. He set the tray down on the bedside table, then hesitated. May I ask you something? Of course. Earlier, when Minseok called, you mentioned knowing about his criminal activities. How much do you actually know? Victoria settled into the comfortable chair by the window, cradling her tea. More than I realized, apparently. He thought I wasn't paying attention, but... She shrugged. I notice things. Tell me. As Victoria began to recount months of overheard phone calls, suspicious visitors, and Minseok's careful explanations for his frequent absences, Jae-hyun listened with the focus of a predator planning a hunt. She told him about the men in expensive suits who spoke in code, about the briefcases full of cash she wasn't supposed to see, about the nights when Minseok came home with bruised knuckles and blood on his clothes. He has a warehouse in Incheon, she said finally. He thinks I don't know about it, but I followed him there once when I was suspicious about where he was spending his time. The security there was extensive. Incheon, Jae-hyun repeated thoughtfully. That's where they've been moving the weapons shipments. You know about those? We've been trying to intercept them for months, but the Kangs are careful. They never use the same route twice. His eyes sharpened with interest. What else can you tell me about the warehouse? Victoria closed her eyes, remembering. It's near the docks, surrounded by legitimate shipping facilities. The building itself looks industrial from the outside, but the security is way more sophisticated than you'd expect for a normal warehouse. Cameras, guards, electronic locks, the whole thing. Guard schedules? I only saw it once, but there were at least 6 men visible, and that was just the ones I could see from my hiding spot. Jae-hyun nodded slowly. This information could be invaluable. With the right approach, we might be able to not only shut down their operation but gather enough evidence to destroy the entire Kang Empire. What kind of evidence? Financial records, shipping manifests, communication logs, anything that proves their illegal activities and connects them to specific crimes. Victoria set down her tea, a new determination filling her. I want to help. Victoria. I'm serious. Minseok tried to kill me tonight, but he's probably hurt other people too. If I can help stop him, help stop his family from hurting more innocent people. She placed her hand on her belly. I want my child to grow up in a world where monsters like Minseok face consequences for their actions. Jae-hyun studied her face for a long moment. It would be dangerous. So is doing nothing. So is letting him continue to terrorize people. Victoria met his eyes steadily. Besides, you said yourself that I know things I don't realize I know. Maybe together we can piece together enough to bring down his entire operation. Together, Jae-hyun repeated, and something warm flickered in his dark eyes. Together, Victoria confirmed. As they talked through the night, planning and strategizing, Victoria felt a sense of purpose she'd never experienced before. For months, she'd been a victim of Minseok's manipulation, of her own naivety, of circumstances beyond her control. But now, working with Jae-hyun to plan Minseok's downfall, she felt like she was finally taking control of her own destiny. There's something else, Victoria said as dawn began to lighten the sky outside. Minseok mentioned that his engagement was worth hundreds of millions of won. That kind of money doesn't just come from one business deal. No, Jae-hyun agreed. It doesn't. What else did he say about the engagement? That it would secure his family's expansion into legitimate business. But also that it was time-sensitive, that the deal had to be finalized before. Victoria frowned, trying to remember. Before some kind of investigation went public. Jae-hyun's entire body went still. Investigation? Something about government prosecutors looking into construction contracts. Minseok seemed worried that if certain information came to light, the engagement family would back out. The Choi family is one of the most powerful chaebols in Korea, Jae-hyun said slowly. If they're considering an alliance with the Kangs despite an ongoing investigation, it means they either don't know about the criminal activities, or they're planning to use the marriage to legitimize those activities. Legitimize how? By creating shell companies through the marriage connection, moving illegal funds through legitimate businesses, essentially washing their criminal enterprise clean. Victoria felt sick. And if the marriage goes through? The Kang family becomes untouchable. Too wealthy, too well-connected, too legitimate to prosecute effectively. The weight of what they were discussing settled over Victoria like a heavy blanket. When is the engagement supposed to be finalized? I don't know, but given Minseok's desperation to eliminate you. Jae-hyun's expression was grim. Soon. They were interrupted by the soft chime of Jae-hyun's secure phone. He answered it with a sharp yes, and listened intently before hanging up. What is it? Victoria asked. My people have been monitoring police communications. Minseok filed a missing persons report for you this morning. What? According to the report, you're a mentally unstable pregnant woman who's been making threats against your boyfriend and his family. The story is that you attacked him last night and then disappeared, possibly to harm yourself or others. Victoria stared at him in shock. He's making me out to be the dangerous one. It's a smart play, Jae-hyun admitted grimly. Now if anything happens to you, he can claim it was suicide or an accident brought on by your mental state. And if you try to go public with your story, his will already be on record. But I have proof, the injuries, which he can claim were self-inflicted or happened when you attacked him. Jae-hyun's voice was gentle but firm. Victoria, this is exactly how powerful men protect themselves. They control the narrative from the beginning. The realization hit Victoria like a physical blow. Even now, even after everything, Minseok was still manipulating the situation to his advantage. So what do? We get ahead of his narrative. Jae-hyun's eyes were hard with determination. We gather evidence, build an unshakable case, and then we destroy him so completely that no one will ever believe another word he says. How? By hitting him where it will hurt most, his engagement and his family's business empire. Jae-hyun stood up, pacing to the window. If we can expose their criminal activities before the engagement is finalized, we can prevent them from becoming untouchable. Victoria joined him at the window, looking out over Seoul as the city woke up. Somewhere out there, Minseok was probably telling anyone who would listen that she was a dangerous, unstable woman. But here, in this moment, planning his downfall with a man who actually saw her as capable and strong, Victoria felt more powerful than she ever had in her life. What's our first move? She asked. Jae-hyun turned to look at her, and the approval in his eyes made her heart skip. We start with what you know about Minseok's schedule and routines. If we're going to hit the warehouse in Incheon, we need to know when he won't be there to interfere. As they began planning in earnest, Victoria felt a thrill of anticipation that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with the man beside her. Jae-hyun looked at her like she was a partner, not a victim. Like she was someone worth protecting, worth fighting alongside. It was intoxicating. Victoria, Jae-hyun said suddenly, his voice serious. Yes? I need you to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. Minseok will know you're actively working against him, and his retaliation will be swift and brutal. More brutal than pushing me off a cliff? Possibly. His dark eyes were intense. I can protect you, but I can't guarantee your safety completely. Are you sure this is what you want? Victoria thought about her unborn child, about the kind of world she wanted to bring them into. A world where men like Minseok faced consequences, where victims had advocates, where justice actually meant something. I'm sure, she said firmly. Then we start today. Jae-hyun's smile was sharp and predatory. By the time we're done with him, Kang Minseok will wish he'd never heard your name. The next several hours passed in intensive planning. Jae-hyun's organization proved to be remarkably sophisticated, with resources that rivaled government intelligence agencies. They had detailed files on the Kang family's business operations, surveillance photos of key players, and financial records that painted a clear picture of money laundering and illegal arms dealing. How do you have access to all this? Victoria asked as she reviewed documents that would have taken law enforcement months to compile. When the system fails to provide justice, people like me become necessary, Jae-hyun replied. We exist in the spaces between official law enforcement and vigilante justice. And you're comfortable with that role? Jae-hyun's expression grew thoughtful. I used to think I was. But lately. His eyes found hers. Lately I've been wondering if there might be other ways to live. The implications of his words hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Victoria felt her pulse quicken, but before she could respond, one of Jae-hyun's men appeared in the doorway. "Boss," the man said urgently. "We have a problem." Jae-hyun's entire demeanor shifted, becoming coldly professional. "What kind of problem?" Minseok's mobilized his father's entire security force. They're conducting a systematic search of the city, hitting every safe house and hideout they can think of. How comprehensive. Very. They've got the police helping them, claiming it's part of the missing persons search for Victoria. But their real targets are our operations. Victoria felt ice fill her veins. "They're coming here?" "Not yet," the man replied. "But they will. It's only a matter of time before they work their way through every location." Jae-hyun cursed in Korean. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours, maybe less. Then we accelerate our timeline." Jae-hyun turned to Victoria. "I'm sorry, but we can't wait to build the perfect case. We have to hit them now, with what we have." "What does that mean?" "It means we're going to that warehouse tonight. We get the evidence we need to destroy them, and we get out before they can retaliate." Victoria's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The baby was active today, kicking and shifting as if sensing her anxiety. "Is it safe for me to?" "No." Jae-hyun's voice was firm. "You're staying here. But you need me. I'm the only one who's actually been to the warehouse, who knows the layout." "Victoria." His hands cupped her face gently. "I won't put you and your child at risk. Not for revenge, not for justice, not for anything." The tenderness in his touch contrasted sharply with the dangerous intensity in his eyes, and Victoria found herself leaning into his warmth. "What if something happens to you?" "It won't." "But what if it does? What if this is some kind of trap, and Minseok is expecting you?" "Then I'll deal with it." His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. "But you'll be safe, and that's what matters." Victoria stared into his dark eyes, seeing not just determination but something deeper, more personal. He wasn't just protecting her out of duty or principle, there were feelings involved now, emotions that complicated everything and made the stakes unbearably high. "Jae-hyun," she whispered. "I know." His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "I know this is complicated. I know the timing is terrible. But I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's real." Before Victoria could respond, his lips were on hers, soft and demanding and desperate. She melted into the kiss, her hands fisting in his shirt as months of fear and loneliness poured out of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she could see her own emotions reflected in his eyes. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I will." His promise was steel wrapped in velvet. "I swear to you, I will." As Jae-hyun and his team prepared for their mission, Victoria tried to push down the growing sense of dread in her chest. Everything was happening too fast, the connection between her and Jae-hyun, the escalating danger from Minseok, the race against time to gather evidence before the engagement could be finalized. "Boss," another one of Jae-hyun's men appeared, his face grim. "We've got an update on the search. They're moving faster than we expected." "How much faster?" "They hit the safe house in Hongdae an hour ago. Found signs that someone had been there recently." Victoria's blood chilled. How is that possible? Jae-hyun's expression was thunderous. "Someone's feeding them information. Someone who knows our operations well enough to guide them to our locations." "A traitor," Victoria breathed. "A traitor," he confirmed grimly. "Which means they could be here within hours, not days." The room erupted into controlled chaos as Jae-hyun's people began implementing emergency protocols. Victoria found herself hustled into what was clearly a panic room, reinforced walls, independent air supply, communication equipment, and enough supplies to last for days. "I don't want to hide in here while you're out there risking your life," Victoria protested. And I don't want to worry about your safety while I'm trying to focus on the mission, Jae-hyun replied firmly. This room is impregnable. Even if they breach the rest of the apartment, you'll be safe here. What about after? If something happens to you? Nothing will happen to me. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I have too much to live for now. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. In the space of 24 hours, this man had become her protector, her partner, and something much more personal. The thought of losing him was unbearable. Don't take unnecessary risks, she pleaded. Whatever evidence you find, it's not worth your life. Neither is it worth yours. His hands cupped her face. Which is why I'm getting it fast and getting out. By tomorrow morning, we'll have everything we need to destroy Minseok completely. As the panic room door sealed shut with a soft hiss, Victoria settled in to wait. The room was equipped with monitors that showed feeds from various security cameras throughout the building and surrounding area, giving her a bird's-eye view of the preparations for what was clearly a major operation. She watched Jae-hyun's people move with military precision, checking weapons and communication equipment with the efficiency of an elite special forces unit. These weren't just criminals, they were professionals operating with a level of organization and discipline that spoke of serious training and leadership. At the center of it all was Jae-hyun, coordinating everything with calm authority while somehow managing to project an aura of controlled violence that made even his own people treat him with careful respect. This was a man used to command, used to making life and death decisions, used to operating in a world where hesitation could be fatal. And somehow, impossibly, he'd chosen to use all that power and danger to protect her. Victoria placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's responsive kicks. Your daddy, your biological father, is a monster, she whispered. But the man who's going to raise you, who's going to protect us both, he's something special. The words felt right as she spoke them, despite how crazy the situation was. In less than a day, she'd gone from victim to partner to something approaching family with a man she barely knew. It should have been insane. Instead, it felt like the first sane thing that had happened to her in months. On the monitors, she watched the team's final preparations. Jae-hyun appeared in one of the camera feeds, and even through the small screen she could see the tension in his shoulders, the cold focus in his eyes as he shifted into his professional mode. Be careful, she whispered to the screen. As if he'd heard her, Jae-hyun looked directly into the camera that fed to her monitor. His expression softened for just a moment, and he pressed his hand to his chest, over his heart, in what she realized was a message meant just for her. Then he was gone, disappearing from the camera's view as he headed out into the Seoul night to steal the evidence that would destroy her tormentor and secure their future together. Victoria settled into wait, her hands still protective over her unborn child, her heart full of hope and terror in equal measure. In a few hours, she would either be free to start a new life with the man who'd saved her, or she would be alone again, hiding in a panic room while the world outside went to hell. But for the first time since she'd learned she was pregnant, Victoria wasn't facing the future alone. Win or lose, live or die, she had someone fighting for her. Someone who saw her as worth protecting, worth risking everything for. It was more than she'd ever dared to hope for. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. Victoria tried to distract herself by reviewing the evidence they'd already compiled, but her attention kept drifting to the communications equipment that would alert her when Jae-hyun's team made contact. Every minute that passed without word felt like an eternity. Finally, at 3:47 a.m., the secure phone rang. Victoria grabbed it immediately. Jae-hyun? We're in position. His voice was calm but intense. The warehouse is exactly as you described. Visual confirmation of illegal weapons storage and what looks like a significant drug operation. Any sign of Minseok? Negative. The building appears to be lightly guarded, just the skeleton crew we expected for overnight security. Victoria felt a flutter of unease. That seems too easy. That's what I'm thinking. Jae-hyun's voice carried the same concern. But we're committed now. Moving in for evidence retrieval. Be careful. Always am. I'll contact you when we're clear. The line went dead, leaving Victoria alone with her fears and the baby's restless movements. Something felt wrong about this whole situation, but she couldn't put her finger on what exactly was bothering her. 20 minutes later, her unease proved justified when multiple alarms began blaring throughout the building. Through the panic room's monitors, she could see armed men flooding into the apartment, far too many of them, moving with the coordination of a military assault team. Her secure phone rang again, and Victoria grabbed it desperately. Jae-hyun? Victoria. But it wasn't Jae-hyun's voice. It was Minseok's, cold and triumphant. Did you really think your new boyfriend was the only one capable of setting traps? If you're on the edge of your seat wondering what happens next, smash that like button and let me know in the comments if you think Victoria and Jae-hyun can outsmart Minseok's deadly game. Horror washed over Victoria as the implications hit her. Where is Jae-hyun? Oh, he's alive. For now. Minseok's voice was casually cruel. But he walked right into a trap, just like I knew he would. You see, Victoria, I've been planning this for much longer than you realized. You're lying. Am I? Check your monitors. See how easily my men breached his impregnable security. Victoria's eyes flew to the screens, and her heart sank. The armed men weren't just in the building, they were systematically moving through every room, clearly familiar with the layout. This wasn't a desperate search, it was a precise operation carried out by people who knew exactly where they were going. Impossible, she breathed. Not impossible when you have inside information. Minseok's laugh was pure malice. Did you think Seoul's criminal underworld was so mysterious? So impenetrable? My family has had eyes and ears in every organization for years, including the so-called Seoul Dragons. The truth hit Victoria like ice water. You have someone inside Jae-hyun's organization. I have someone very close to Jae-hyun's organization, Minseok corrected. Someone who's been feeding me information about your whereabouts and his plans since the moment he pulled you off that cliff. Victoria's mind raced through the possibilities, her blood chilling as she realized how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. What do you want? What I've always wanted. For you and that bastard you're carrying to disappear permanently. His voice went deadly serious. But now I also want to send a message to anyone else who thinks they can interfere with my family's business. Through the monitors, Victoria watched the armed men reach the panic room door. They didn't seem surprised by its location or confused by its security. They moved with the confidence of people who knew exactly what they'd find. The panic room won't protect you forever, Minseok continued. My people have the codes to override the locks. You have about 5 minutes before they breach your little sanctuary. Codes that only Jae-hyun's inner circle would know, Victoria said, the betrayal cutting deep. Clever girl. Yes, the codes that only his most trusted lieutenant would have access to. Sung-ho. The name came to Victoria with crushing certainty. Jae-hyun had suspected him earlier, but they'd thought the traitor had been identified and contained. Instead, he'd been playing them all along, feeding Minseok information while pretending loyalty to the Seoul Dragons. 5 minutes, Victoria, Minseok repeated. You can come quietly and make this easy, or you can make it difficult and watch what happens to your boyfriend as a result. What do you mean? I mean that right now, Jae-hyun is tied up in that warehouse you so helpfully described for us, surrounded by enough explosives to level half the district. Whether he lives or dies depends entirely on your cooperation. Victoria's vision blurred with tears of rage and despair. Even now, even when she thought she'd found safety and love and partnership, Minseok was still manipulating her, still using her emotions against her. But as she stared at the monitors showing armed men preparing to breach her sanctuary, Victoria realized something that surprised her. She wasn't the same terrified woman who'd fallen off a cliff last night. 24 hours of being treated like an equal, like someone worth fighting for and with, had changed something fundamental inside her. Minseok, she said into the phone, her voice steady despite her fear. Yes? You made one mistake in all your careful planning. And what's that? Victoria's hand moved protectively to her belly, drawing strength from the life growing inside her. You assumed I was still the helpless woman you tried to murder. But I'm not her anymore. Before Minseok could respond, Victoria hung up the phone and began implementing her own plan. The panic room wasn't just a hiding place, it was a command center, equipped with everything needed to coordinate emergency responses. Victoria had been watching Jae-hyun's people prepare all day, and she'd learned enough about their operations to know that the Seoul Dragons had contingencies for situations exactly like this. Her fingers flew over the communication equipment, sending out the emergency codes Jae-hyun had shown her during their planning sessions. Within seconds, responses began flooding in, confirmation that backup teams were mobilizing, that emergency protocols were being activated, that Minseok's trap was about to become a war zone. But Victoria wasn't done. If Minseok wanted to play games of manipulation and betrayal, she would show him exactly how much she'd learned from watching a master. She activated the building's security system, not to keep people out, but to trap the intruders inside. Emergency lockdown protocols sealed every exit, and the elevators shut down completely. Minseok's men were now trapped in the building with backup teams converging on their location. "Time to see how you handle being the hunted instead of the hunter," Victoria murmured as she watched chaos erupt on the monitors. Her phone rang again, Minseok, predictably, calling to threaten and intimidate. But Victoria didn't answer. Instead, she used the panic room's independent communication system to contact Jae-hyun directly. "Jae-hyun, can you hear me?" Static filled the line for a moment, then his voice came through, strained but determined. "Victoria? How are you? Never mind. Listen carefully. Sung-ho betrayed us, but we suspected it might happen. There are backup plans." "Already implementing them," Victoria interrupted. "I've got your people converging on both locations, and I've trapped Minseok's assault team in your building." A moment of surprised silence. "You did what?" "I told you I wasn't helpless anymore." Despite everything, Victoria found herself smiling. "Now tell me how to get you out of there alive." As they worked together across the city, Victoria coordinating from the panic room while Jae-hyun fought his way out of Minseok's trap, she felt the same sense of partnership that had drawn her to him in the first place. This was what it felt like to have someone who truly saw her as an equal, who trusted her capabilities even in the most dangerous circumstances. "Explosive charges are on a timer," Jae-hyun reported. "But I can disarm them if I can reach the primary detonator." "Where is it?" "Second floor office, northeast corner." "But there are at least 6 guards between me and..." "Not anymore." Victoria watched the building schematics on her screen, tracking the movements of both Jae-hyun's team and Minseok's men. "Your backup just breached the south entrance. The guards are repositioning to meet them." "Clear path?" Victoria studied the monitors intently. "Clear path. You have maybe 3 minutes." "On my way." As Victoria watched Jae-hyun navigate through the warehouse, disabling security systems and avoiding patrols with the skill of a professional soldier, she realized that this was her life now. Not the desperate hiding and running of the past day, but this, being part of a team, contributing her skills to something larger than herself, fighting alongside someone who valued her mind as much as he protected her body. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely nothing like the safe, conventional life she'd thought she wanted. "Detonator disabled," Jae-hyun's voice crackled through the communication system. "Building is secure." "And Victoria?" "Yes?" "Remind me to never underestimate you again." Victoria laughed, surprising herself with the sound. "I'll try to keep surprising you." "I'm counting on it." But their celebration was premature. Even as Jae-hyun's team secured the warehouse and gathered the evidence they needed, Minseok was implementing backup plans of his own. Victoria watched in growing horror as new teams of armed men appeared on the building's perimeter, not his father's security forces this time, but something much worse. "Jae-hyun," she said urgently. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that involves military-grade weapons and body armor." Minseok's called in mercenaries. The curse that came through the communication system would have made Victoria blush under normal circumstances. "How many?" "At least 20, probably more." Victoria studied the tactical displays, her heart sinking. "They're surrounding the building. This isn't about capturing me anymore, This is about elimination. Hold position. I'm coming back. No. Victoria's voice was sharp with fear. You'll never make it through their perimeter. Besides, they want both of us dead now. If you come here, you're just giving them what they want. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. We're going to end this together, but we're going to do it smart. Victoria's mind was racing, pieces clicking together as she formulated a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. Minseok thinks he's cornered us, but he's forgotten something important. What's that? Victoria smiled grimly as she began accessing files she'd noticed earlier but hadn't fully understood. The evidence we gathered tonight, it's not just about the Kong family's crimes. It's about their business partners, their political connections, their ties to some very dangerous people who won't appreciate being exposed. Victoria, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to show Minseok what happens when you threaten the wrong people. Her fingers flew over the communication controls, sending encrypted files to every major news outlet in Korea, every law enforcement agency, and most importantly, to the rivals and enemies of everyone the Kong family had ever betrayed or double-crossed. You said earlier that desperate men make mistakes. Well, Minseok just made the biggest mistake of his life. As chaos erupted across Seoul, raids being launched, arrests being made, and some very angry criminal organizations mobilizing against the Kong family, Victoria felt a fierce satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice finally being served. But the game wasn't over yet. Through her monitors, she could see the mercenaries preparing to breach the building, and she could hear Minseok's voice on the security system, no longer smooth and controlled but raw with desperate fury. Victoria. His voice echoed through the building. You've just signed your own death warrant. Victoria picked up her communication device and switched to the building's general announcement system, ensuring that everyone, mercenaries, backup teams, and Minseok himself, could hear her response. The only death warrant signed tonight was yours, Minseok. And you signed it the moment you pushed a pregnant woman off a cliff. As the final battle began in earnest, with Seoul Dragon reinforcements engaging the mercenaries while law enforcement raids decimated the Kong family's operations across the city, Victoria realized that this was the end of one story and the beginning of another. The terrified woman who'd fallen from a cliff was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone capable of fighting back, someone worthy of the dangerous, passionate man who'd risked everything to save her. Now all she had to do was survive long enough to claim the future they'd both fought so hard to protect. The last thing she heard before the sounds of battle overwhelmed the communication system was Jae-hyun's voice, steady and determined. Hold on, Victoria. I'm coming home to you. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Victoria truly believed that everything was going to be all right. But as the lights flickered and the building shook with the force of explosions, she realized that the most dangerous part of their story was just beginning. What will happen when Jae-hyun fights his way back to Victoria? Will Minseok's mercenaries succeed in their deadly mission? And what does the future hold for a love born from betrayal and forged in the fires of revenge? Don't forget to like this video if you're loving Victoria and Jae-hyun's incredible journey, subscribe for part 2 of this epic story, and let me know in the comments what you think Victoria should do next. Your support means everything, and part 2 is going to be absolutely explosive. Fire.